Okay, we're live. Good evening, everybody. People seeing this live and the people probably who are going to see this afterwards. For those of you who don't know me, I am Dan, co-founder of the Silly Heads social enterprise, all about putting a face on mental health. That's what we do. So I can see Aoife has joined. So I'll invite Aoife on now. I'm really looking forward to this. So this is all about DBT, a therapy I know nothing about and plan on learning, I suppose, as I go along here. So let me find... okay. Just going to wait for Aoife now to pop on. These lives are very finicky altogether.
Hiya.
Yay! It worked. How are you? I love the attire.
Oh yeah, in yellow.
Yeah, your favorite color. I obviously found that out
Yeah.
through the Silly Heads. How are you anyway? How are things?
Yeah, not too bad. Doing good. It's good to have college kind of out of the way now. I can start to relax a bit.
Is it completely out of the way now, or do you have more stuff to go?
I did defer 2 piano exams until August, so I have to practice over the summer, but I have all my projects and stuff in for this semester.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know, it might be my Wi-Fi, but the screen is a little bit glitchy, but nevertheless I can hear you okay. I think that's probably the most important thing.
Okay. 1 second.
But
I can try.
the joys of technology, huh? It could well be my
Oh
Wi-Fi
dear.
as well. But we can hear you okay anyway. We can hear you okay.
Okay, good.
So listen, Aoife, I remember putting this out to you through the Silly Heads about DBT because I first heard about this when we did our workshop with you through MTU, and this popped up in our kind of self-care section, and I was like, what is DBT? And I consciously didn't go and research it because I planned on chatting to you at some point, and then I suggested that we do the live on DBT. So completely new to this from the very start. What is DBT therapy?
So the DBT stands for Dialectical Behavioural Therapy. So dialectics is like taking two opposing ideas and finding a middle ground or a same common goal. So it was invented by Marsha Linehan. She's an American lady and she's still alive. It's actually quite recent. She came up with it in the 1970s, 1980s. And yeah, she took CBT and that approach and a psychological approach and took the other dialectic, which is humanism and Buddhism mindfulness. And she came up with a therapy kind of using those two things.
Okay, interesting. Okay. So within kind of a paragraph, you've shed some clarity on it. So I would be familiar with CBT. So yes. It's taking the CBT model and merging it with, you mentioned a humanistic kind of approach, which is your mindfulness and Buddhism
and
teaching.
Kind of like a validation and supportive role, whereas I guess cognitive behavioural therapy focuses on thinking errors and maybe resolving the problem within yourself and your own kind of head, whereas DBT is a kind of more an emotional side of it. Now, It was initially created for people with, I guess, just trigger warning, with high risk behaviours. So they weren't responding very well to CBT. So when she came up with DBT herself, it kind of has 4 main modules in it. So mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. And now when I was starting DBT, it sounds like a load of jargon, or a lot of words. But through doing it, you start to learn that it's not as intimidating as it sounds. So
yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. There was just a question came in about what CBT is. And now obviously, as you mentioned, trigger warning, neither of us are professionals here. I think we're
Of course,
too
I
big.
meant to mention that at the start as well. Just, I'm not a professional. It's just my own personal experience of doing the
Yeah, yeah,
therapy,
yeah,
knowing other people who do it, and things like that.
yeah. And that's often the most powerful thing. And it's like ourselves. Um, we have a personal story, and that's it. And of course, we signpost and we listen, but we're not professionals. But my experience of CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, um, for me, it was about challenging um, a lot of distorted thinking, which was quite tough. Um, I hope you can still hear me. If I think your Wi-Fi
Yeah.
is breaking up a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
Okay,
I'm
once
on
we
my
can hear each other,
4G.
that's fine.
Is it breaking up
No,
for
you're
other
good. Once we
people?
can hear each other, we're all good.
Or- Okay.
Yeah, if it is breaking up, the sound-wise, you might pop it in the chat and let us know. But I can hear you fine. It sometimes just gets pixelated. So yeah, CBT was it was hard. I mean, I'm not going to lie, and I appreciate it could be different for everyone else. Um, and I'd be honest, I kind of took it. I used, I suppose, the core elements of CBT, and I found that you really need to apply yourself to any therapy. Really, there's a lot of stuff done in your own time. I was very much
Yeah.
going into the counselor's office and expecting to come out running and skipping, because I didn't know anything about it. Um,
Yeah.
Little did I know that it actually involves a lot of tasks at home or wherever it might be. Um, and I found that challenging from a CBT point of view. Did you find that with DBT as well? Or is it like,
Definitely.
yeah?
There's a lot of homework with DBT.
Yeah,
So it
that's a
was
good
kind
way
of
of putting
funny
it, actually. Yeah.
to go into something like this and have homework to do. But in another way, it really helps because it's very task based. Because I've been through a
Right.
lot of different therapies. I've done CBT and I've done CFT and talk therapy. And DBT is the one that's very task based, and that
Okay.
you're learning skills. It's very skills based, fact based, and it really helps you sometimes when you don't know and you question your own anxious thoughts and you don't quite know where you stand. It's very grounding to have that. And I have in front of me here, I have each week, I'm on the Endeavour course, or I'm just coming to the end of Endeavour. So
Okay.
that's, I guess I explain as well. Sometimes I forget that people don't know.
Yeah, I do
So
explain that.
yeah. So there's two courses that run in Cork, and I'm in the Northleigh mental health service up there. So I was actually on a waiting list for nearly 2 years for it. So there wasn't therapies, it wasn't running because there was a lack of therapists. And then once I was on the waiting list, I was waiting another year for it. But
Okay.
it was definitely worth it. But I guess unfortunately I came on during COVID times, so everything I've had has been online through group therapy. So for the Endeavour program, it is group therapy and one-to-one, and you get phone coaching as well. So in the group therapy, you learn the skills, which are the four modules: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness.
Okay.
And you learn that over 6 months. And then those are repeated again, and you go through them again. And then each week we fill out like a diary card. And if you can see,
I've
it
seen these kind
has,
of on your stories, maybe a little bit, or it might have been
yes,
the workshop. Like, it's this
mm,
is how you do therapy, really, isn't it? Like, you're the
yes.
gold standard. I have to say.
But I would even just recommend to anybody who is feeling distressed themselves or anxiety, just to grade your day and just to put a number. And like in this, we put a number for each emotion. So there's sad, shame, anger, anxiety, fear, and joy. So you kind of grade these because it is aimed at people who have borderline personality disorder. And now, to say that, I guess I'll just explain a little bit because it can be a bit like, even when I found out I had the diagnosis and I do my own mental health stuff myself, I was like, what is this? I've never heard of it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it can be quite a scary word as well.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
um, they came up with the name borderline. I guess they call it borderline personality disorder in America, and they call it EUPD here in the Europe, which is emotionally unstable personality disorder. So borderline comes from, they thought it was between the borderline of psychosis and neurosis. So psychosis are like disorders where you're not in tune with reality, and neurosis
Yeah.
are ones where you are. So ones
Am I
like
right
depression, anxiety.
sorry for interrupting you. Am I right in saying
Not at all.
psychosis is almost a symptom of schizophrenia? I've read somewhere that that's almost a symptom of schizophrenia, but I kind of, I've a bit of history of psychosis in my family, and I absolutely think it's a whole thing on its own. I don't see it as a symptom. Like it's very, very, it needs to be managed as a singular illness. I don't know. Maybe you
Yes.
could. Sorry for interrupting you, but I just thought it was nice
Not
to
at all.
promote that. Yeah.
My understanding is that I suppose psychosis disorders, you might in things that aren't reality, I suppose maybe paranoia, hallucinations,
Mm.
and aural or visual or mania and things like that. So bipolar can come under psychosis sometimes for people with mania. They experience things like that, and sometimes they don't. But it is interesting, like that it's not talked about more. It seems really scary to say psychosis because all the stigma around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah. So kind of where borderline comes from, they thought borderline personality disorder was the border between neurosis and psychosis, but now they've found out that it's more. They think more it's more like mood and emotion based and emotion regulation. So nearly the term is nearly outdated itself. And even emotionally unstable personality disorder is nearly like a stigma to say. It's like when I think of something that's unstable, I think it's something that's going to fall or break at any moment.
Yeah,
And
that's surprising. And this
yeah,
is the European terminology. Am I right?
yeah. So the ICD like would be the equivalent to the DSM. It's kind of like the big book of diagnostic criteria.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of the rest of the world use the ICD, and then the DSM is what America would use for
Yeah.
their diagnostic criteria. But the way my psychiatrist said it to me was if you sat somebody from America and Europe down in the one spot, they would diagnose you with this from both of their sides. It would
Yeah.
be EUPD and BPD, they're the equivalent.
I think you touched on something very important there, and like it was the use of the word unstable in trying to put a label on a condition. And with the silly heads, we try to externalize them with the characters, and because that's what we believe. We think very much like the humanistic approach, which are therapy. There's a human being with ambitions and potential within all of us. I'm very surprised. Like, is that a new term in the European side of things? Like, if they come up with this in the last couple of years, because that sounds like something that's like back in the '60s or something.
Yeah. So actually BPD was only a disorder that came up in the 70s, 80s. So it is a relatively new disorder. So that's what I
Yeah.
say to people as well. If you think of anxiety and depression have been around or have been, obviously they've been around longer, but that it's been recognized for over 200 years.
Yeah.
So if you think of the how back and anxiety and depression are only getting recognized in the media and it's only getting talked about a bit more now, think of how behind other disorders are. So that's how I try to explain it to people. So yeah, there
Yeah.
are professionals out there that are kind of doing petitions to get it renamed. So they're thinking either emotional intensity disorder or emotional dysregulation disorder, or they want to kind of move it out of, I guess, sorry, I'm moving a bit fast as well, but in the DSM,
No, no, you're fine.
there are different criteria or different groupings of mental illness, I would say.
Yeah.
And because borderline comes under ones with antisocial personality disorder, which used to be called psychopaths or things like that, it's under that grouping, and that's a lot of stigma comes from that as well.
Yeah,
because people assume, you know, that
from what they've
it's
seen,
really awful.
yeah,
Yeah,
in the media and whatever. I
yeah,
remember, and again, you know, my knowledge. I don't know, do you find this, but in my dealings with generalized anxiety disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder, uh, living with the two of those, I found it. I find that I didn't actually venture in and learn more about other illnesses because I had so much going on with these ones
yeah,
that were, you know, they were extremely extreme at times. But and I remember even again my own family, the words like manic depressive would have been used, which we now know, and I think I'm right, is now called bipolar. Uh,
yes.
but back in the day, that was thrown around a lot. You know, sure, your man there was manic depressive, like, and it
Yeah.
almost be like without even realizing what it was just flung at someone.
Yeah,
Um,
I can even remember being in school and they'd be, oh my gosh, she's so bipolar, the teacher. And it's
oh
like,
God,
you know,
yeah, and you're
yeah,
obviously of a younger generation than me, um, and I've heard it. I've heard the weather is so bipolar. Obviously, one that's close to my heart is I'm so OCD if something's not clean because I'm
and
in.
I would say to people that a mental illness is not an adjective. You know, you would not say I'm a
100%,
little bit cancer. I'm a little bit, you know, you wouldn't use anything like that. It's
100%.
just it's an illness, it's a disorder, you know, and it really stigmatizes by belittling other people's experience and spreading misinformed, you know, thoughts about it.
Yeah, it's almost just disregarded because I don't know about you, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it. But for someone who has suffered with OCD, uh, and my OCD often would have defaulted back to my health, um, wanting to know the answer to my health, basically convincing myself I had something seriously wrong, but to the point where I almost started to considered actually, and this is you know, I'll throw the trigger warning here because we're kind of maybe moving into the area of thoughts of self harm. So just give people a chance to understand and process that before I actually say it. But my search for reassurance uh, almost went to the point of me nearly going into my body and looking and like, you know, actually looking for the answer, maybe, I don't know, finding something because I was so desperate for reassurance. So when somebody says I'm a little OCD, I'm instantly cast back to that point in time, uh,
Yeah.
which was horrific. It was absolutely horrific because, you know, that shows you the extremity of the thoughts. But I don't know about you when people throw out those comments, do you kind of go back and you fall into a time where you kind of, you know, it's the real actual meat of kind of the illness. And I know for me,
Yeah.
I feel really kind of shitty when I hear it, you know. And I appreciate anyone who maybe hasn't been through it, maybe not, maybe don't doesn't feel like that at all. But for someone who's in it, it's quite hard to hear.
It really is. And I guess another like trigger warning, I would say, people with BPD or EUPD do have high risk behaviors, and DBT deals with that as well, is what I would say is kind of like the pyramid, you know, like you'd see your food pyramid. So, like, you'd have high risk behaviors, therapy interfering behaviors, and then quality of life. So, the way I look at it is DBT therapy puts out the fire, you know, and you're putting out the fire, but it's very much dealing in the present and the now, week by week, and how you're coping behaviorally. Whereas other therapies might look at the root reason, which is why I'm like, you know, why is the fire starting? But if you look to see why the fire is starting and the house is burnt down, you know, because you haven't put out the fire, is the way that I look at it as. But there would be, I guess, BPD as well to kind of explain what it might be like to live with it. Is its emotional intensity. So it's like somebody's broken the knob on like a volume thing. And
Yeah.
when I feel emotions, they are extremely strong.
Mm-hmm.
So when I feel sad, it's like grieving, when I feel shame, it is like I am a terrible person and I don't deserve to live, you know, kind of things like that. And when fear, and a lot of people will struggle with anger with BPD, not everybody. Anger wouldn't be one of my top emotions. And that's another stigma. People think that people with BPD are just angry, and I won't even say some of the things because they're really horrible that people say about the disorder. But the whole way of DBT is looking that every function or every emotion has a function. So like
Yeah.
sadness and tears tell us that we need, you know, we need comfort and we need to reach out. Like anger tells us that things are unfair and, you know, that we need better than this. Or anger is a secondary emotion anyway, so it usually comes from another emotion. And anxiety and fear, you know, they keep us safe. But it's when they're out of the norm that they interfere with your daily living. You know, like I say, like you know, I hate when people say everybody gets a bit anxious. And it's like, yes, you know, people have anxiety, it keeps us safe.
Yeah.
But it's when it's out of the normal range and it interferes with your life that it becomes an issue.
Yeah, I love the bit there about putting out the fire. I love, like, as a mental health sufferer, sorry, mental health illness sufferer, I even forget that at times, and I need to catch myself. But when someone can kind of sum up, or, you know, use a couple of words to paint a picture, I can relate because obviously I've kind of been in those zones, so I can really connect with it. Yeah, and a bit like, I'm fascinated by this therapy because I didn't know it was linked to the humanistic side of things. I was fully expecting something else because I am, like, CBT played a very important role in me managing my own mental health, but also I wanted to get into the mindfulness. I wanted to get into the, you know, being present, meditation, but I always saw them as separate. Like, your CBD is here, and then you have your meditation and you have your mindfulness over there. And when I think about it, it makes absolute sense just to take the two and have this therapy called DBT.
Yeah.
And you could
And
probably
I
tell I'm
would
getting a bit
say,
excited about it because I'm like, I think I might be requesting my GP maybe to look into this for me now.
yeah, it's incredibly interesting as well because, like, when you have mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness, when you start DBT, or if you're high risk or you're engaging in self-harm behaviors or suicidal behaviors, you will be using distress tolerance skills. So they're very in the moment, you use them in a crisis situation.
Yeah.
So they're, my go-to would be the TIP skill, which is temp picture, intense exercise, and paced breathing. So I use TIP the temp picture. So I have an ice pack here, and I usually put it on my wrists or on my face, and it will cool you down, like your body down naturally,
Yeah.
and it will slow your blood pressure and, you know, stuff like that. Your heart rate and
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that will come
So
down naturally.
physiological kind of reaction. Yeah.
Yeah. So then there's lots of those kind of like in the moment crisis situation. So
Yeah.
I would look at, you know, when you see those apps out there, they're like mindfulness, yoga, things like that, and people rave about them.
Right.
And then it's like you try it and you're like, why isn't this working for me? What's wrong with me? And now that I've learned that if I'm in a really distressing situation, I'm not going to try and do some yoga. You know, I have to learn that there are certain skills you use when you're feeling certain ways. So through DBT, at the start I was very reliant on distress tolerance skills. And as I've come around, I'm using a lot more mindfulness skills because I'm in a headspace where I'm able to take that in. And I think that's like very important to say to people is like, not every form of therapy will work for you. Not every suggestion will work for you. It depends on where you are in yourself and where you are on your journey to recovery, that you're able to take it in and you're able to take it on board. So yeah, and mindfulness itself, I would say as well, you mentioned meditation, and that is a form of mindfulness, but there are more forms of mindfulness than you think. So there are meditation, there's outward practices. So I find outward practices easier, which would be kind of focusing on external things, and practices where you're just observing and describing and participating. I find them a lot easier to do at the moment anyway. And I will work on, doing inward ones when I
Yeah.
feel I can. But it is really interesting that like I even learned that mindfulness isn't just meditation or isn't just prayer or
Yeah.
things like that. It's I learned a lot myself through it, even though I would say that I've done a lot of research myself in mental health before going into DBT. I have just learned so much.
Yeah, and I truly believe no one will ever be finished learning, probably in all walks of life, but especially in the space of mental health. Um, your comment about kind of self-care, or using those different skills in different situations, I think is probably going to be the golden nugget of this chat, because too often, like just too often, and even from our media broadcasters to whoever, we all get fed the fresh air, the exercise, the nutrition, the sleep. They're all very important. I found kind of the hard way, because when I was going through a very rough time, I was out trying to, like, getting dressed was fucking hell. That was some achievement. And I was trying to go walking. It wasn't what I needed, but that's what I was being fed. And I found after a while that those kind of things for me, and again, I say it for me because it is so individualized to everybody, practicing my self-care when I'm feeling well has stood to me big time. Because I was in a habit of, when I was feeling well, then that was it. I do nothing. And when I felt a heightened kind of sense of anxiety, I'd try and go for a run, and that would be okay. But when it spilled over and I still tried to do a run, it just wasn't happening. I thought that was brilliant, that it's recognizing when you need those skills in certain situations. So now you can get a feel for the slight complexity and the different branches of it. But I think once you tap into those skills and start to research more, you build up such an arsenal of like weaponry against whatever silly heads you're managing. And I know one of yours was your soothe box that you mentioned on the workshop.
Yeah, I have it with me.
I was going to say, can you show us?
My little self-soothe box.
I found this fascinating because what I have is a toolkit, essentially. When I say toolkit, it's a shoebox. That's all it is. And I keep it by my bed, because traditionally that's where a lot of my panic, I had only a handful of panic attacks, but that's generally where they happened. And like that, I would have kept stuff in there that I could rely on very quickly. But your one has taken on a whole other level. If you want to talk a
Yes.
little bit about it.
Yeah, so it's engaging under a distress tolerance skill, engaging your five senses. Some of you might see things like, oh, five things you can hear, four things you can see, and things like that. It kind of ties into that a little bit. So this is my box. Now, I enjoyed like so much going out and getting my little things from my box. It is such a nice experience to be like, I'm getting this for me. So I got this really soft box, like velvety box, because soft textures really make me feel comforted. So inside it, I have like my little tools. So I have a little hand fan to help cool me down, and I can feel that,
Yeah.
and it'll bring my temperature down, and it's something like I can hear it as well, the motor going. Um, Now my go-to, and if anybody follows my page, they've heard me talk about this a lot, is toxic waste sweets. You might have
I
had them as a
remember these.
child.
Yeah.
They're really, really, really sour, like unbearably sour.
Oh, okay.
And they are brilliant, especially if you suffer from dissociation. Do you want me to describe what
Yeah,
dissociation is? I don't want to
I'd
go too
love.
off
I've
point.
I've heard you speak about it, and again, I've resisted going and looking. So I'd love to hear about dissociation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll come back to this in a minute. So dissociation, I suppose I would describe it as, when you have a panic attack and all your symptoms are outward. So you're shaking, you're hyperventilating, you might be crying. So those are all kind of like outward body emotions. So what I see dissociation like is like your brain can't get out of your head. So it pulls a parachute is what I look at it at. So your brain just goes. Yeah. So it's like feeling outside of yourself, or like your shell, and your thoughts will shut down. For me, my cognitive functions shut down. So I will feel it start to come on when I'm struggling a little bit to speak. And for me, I get quite weak. And then I will struggle to talk. Then I won't be able to talk. My brain will shut down. It's like, you have your fight or flight
Yeah,
response.
yeah, that's what I was getting from
It's
it there. Yeah.
so this is actually, there's actually fight, flight, and you have fawn, friend, and freeze. So there's actually more F's in there.
Okay.
And a trigger warning, just they actually talk about these more in abuse cases in court. They would talk about maybe fawn and freeze, if you can think, maybe why. But dissociation is like a freeze and a flight response. So your brain kind of gets away in itself and kind of hides. I do a lot of art to try and communicate this. It's nearly like a block coming up in my head, and I'm gone. So my friends will know that I kind of get a stare. Kind of, I will, they'll slowly see me kind of start to go, and sometimes they notice before I do that I'm dissociating. Um, and it is a trauma response. But as your brain learns that it is a way to cope, because let's face it, it'd be nice to escape yourself every now and then, and escape your emotions, whatnot. So your brain is like, this works. So it's a learned response that this gets me away from the situation I'm in,
Yeah.
and just total shut off. And it's like I'm
That's
not
it.
in my body.
This is probably naivety on my part, but how far away is it from when you're in a daydreaming mode? Is it
Actually, now that you
completely different?
no, it's actually, what I say is that dissociation is a scale, just like anything else.
Okay.
So most people, like anxiety, most people will experience dissociation. So, when people say, I drove to work and I don't even remember the drive,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
a
yeah,
form of
yeah.
dissociation. Yeah. So your brain just tunes out because you're in kind of like motor mode, you're just doing what you're doing and you're not present in the moment. So that is a form of very, very mild dissociation. And then that can go to the point of, I wouldn't say that daydreaming is the same, but zoning out, I would say. And for me,
Mm.
I'm careful when I use the term dissociation, because I use it for when I'm dissociating, like I'm on my way to an episode. What I would say when I'm getting to dissociation is that I'm distant, and it just feels like I'm not quite in reality. If you can think how you feel like in a dream, that's how I feel when I dissociate. Like the world around me is not real. And there are different forms of dissociation. There's depersonalization and derealization. So depersonalization is feeling away from myself. You might look in the mirror or look at your hands and not recognize yourself, or feel total disconnection from your brain to what you're seeing.
Mm.
And derealization is feeling like the world around you, like there's a veil, or there's something different, or things aren't quite real. And that can be dangerous when it gets to a certain point, because if you're not connected with reality and that things are real, you could engage in behaviors that are risky, or you could, you know, like when my motor functions go down, I could just be stuck, like in college at the end towards the exams. I did have it up my story. I said I was stuck on the second floor. I was just sitting there
Mm.
and I was unable to move, but thankfully I had a friend around that was able to come help me walk, and they know what I need in that moment. And people will experience it on different degrees, but mine get quite severe to where I won't be able to move, I won't be able to talk, and it's really distressing.
Yeah, and thanks so much for sharing that because it's, I know myself, Eva, it can be hard to, no matter how many times you talk to people about it. What I will say is, while we're on that subject, our website, thesillyheads.com, our homepage down the bottom has a list of all different supports. I want to just put that out there because I think that's important, just to know where it is. Yeah, I'm trying to relate, and when I was first experiencing OCD, I went through about the bones of a year of existential OCD, where I was convinced that the world around me wasn't real. That a bit like, you know, when people say we're living in a kind of a matrix now or whatever. But at the time, I was very new to it, and it just brought me back to that feeling I had that everything I knew up to that point maybe wasn't what I thought it was. And it actually just kind of subsided on its own, because I really went into the full-on traditional kind of OCD side of things. I just see Mike, who's the co-founder of the Silly Heads, mentioned Wim Hof, the breathing method that works for him. And it's an example again of just the variety of different kind of skills and tools that people can use. But again, like you said, it's about knowing when to use them as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, if I'm down here, I'm not going to be able to do the skill that's for when I'm feeling a bit more able to push myself. If I push myself when I shouldn't, and I know my boundaries and my vulnerabilities, then, you know, I'm not going to put myself in a good place.
It's a great point. And again, we did, when we were sketching the characters, we did kind of a 4-part sketch on our Instagram. And one was about climbing your mountain. And that was when I say climb your mountain, my example for me was, at my very lowest point, was if I can turn over in the bed to get more comfortable, then I've climbed my mountain for that day, because that to me was huge. Like getting dressed, having a shower was like, that's like going to Vegas or something on that particular day if I'd done it. So I kind of went the roundabout way in realizing those very small things, those subtle things, when it's okay to be kind of fully invested in that. Because I think a lot of people, we jump over a lot of things. We like, you know, would you just not have a shower? And I know it sounds simple, but trust me, having a shower,
so difficult.
It's so hard. I want to get back before we finish to your soothe box, because I'm fascinated by it. So if you wouldn't mind continuing on and explaining a bit more.
Yeah, so like my toxic waste are for my taste, and that helps bring me back, or even it makes me laugh because it's so sour. And sometimes if you're in company, it can be a fun thing to take it out, like, oh, we'll all take one of these, you know.
And they're actually like they're sweets.
Yeah, they're just sweets, so they come
Where
in
do you
like
get
little
them?
packets.
Do you have to go to?
I've gotten them in Cork. I've gone just to, you know, those sweet shops. There's one opposite Penny's near there, and I pick up a few of them. But I bought a good few of them on Amazon as well.
Yeah.
They come in the packs.
Excellent. Very good.
So yeah, I stock up on those and I have them around, and my friends know that if I'm in a way that I need to come back, that they'll just, you know, pop one out, like, okay, we're gonna have one now, you know. Or even if they don't have these, my friend will cut up a lemon and get me to suck on a lemon. It's sour, but it helps you kind of regain focus on like what you would say physiological level, that your brain can't ignore it.
Yeah, Stefan, I think is saying they're literally radioactive waste. Very dangerous. I don't think so. Which they're probably not radioactive waste. Probably just brandy, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Steph is my good friend. He helps me out a lot.
Yeah, we met Stefan on a workshop. He's a great guy, an absolutely great guy. So we've got the fan. We've got the sweets for the taste. Yes. So what's next?
And then for the smell, I have this Lush like shower jelly, and it's really citrusy. So the smell is.
I was going in to smell it. I was like,
I know. I wish I could like it.
But I do have a couple of wax melts that we did with a company before, and I give that a little. Smell is a big thing for me, and I know Mike will know this as well. Sun cream in particular.
Yes, recently I've got that as well. The sun cream smell brings you back.
I can't believe I'm leading in to smell it. Anyway, keep going.
And even it's soft like a jelly as well, so it's kind of, you get the texture of it as well. But to smell that is really good. It was funny, I went into Lush and asked, like, I was like, I'm not using the product, I just want something that really smells good.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And is it like, is
and
it a
then
just a, I don't want to say generic, but is it a very particular scent, or is it just one that they
for
have
me,
themselves?
citrusy scents I
Yeah,
really like.
yeah, yeah.
Kind of like a tangy smells are ones that I gravitate towards. So I got that is like a citrus kind of smell.
And where did you, in
Um,
Lush, was it?
yes, I got that in Lush because
Yeah.
I love even their bath bombs and everything. The smell of them is
I
comforting, I would say.
Oh, listen, go in and walk around. I think they're open, and
Yeah.
just go in and walk around and enjoy the experience for 10 minutes. So yeah, so we've got the jelly. Was it the jelly scented stuff that I
Yes.
tried to smell?
I used to do that in Zoom calls. I would go to scroll on the screen when someone was sharing their screen, and I'm like, wait a second.
Oh, I'm glad. Katie, I keep getting Katie's name from Sanya Yoga. I'm glad I'm not the only one, because that is probably one of the most embarrassing things I've ever done. But what about sound, Aoife? Would you have anything for
For
sound?
sound, I have bubble wrap. So you get the texture of it and the
Oh
sound and
yeah,
the popping,
yeah, yeah,
and you get like really texturally into that. So like the sound of that, or even I love the sound of the box when it closes. It makes it like kind of like a thud sound.
yeah.
Um, for me, the bubble wrap and the fan are kind of the sounds. I guess for me, I would play music on my phone or something if I need to kind of get in a different headspace. And
Yeah.
it's funny, even within this skill, in different times I'll gravitate towards different things. So when I'm dissociated or feeling a bit distant, I use my taste. If
Yes.
I'm feeling a bit panicked or anxious, I like soft textures. So I have like little pom poms. I got them in Soster and Grain. If people want to make their own self soup box, go in and have a look around that shop in Cork. If you're in Cork, it's brilliant for picking up things like cheap but that are nice and cute. You feel nice
Brilliant.
getting them.
Yeah.
So these are like little pom poms, and I just put them in the bottom of my bag. And if I'm out, I can just kind of, it's nearly like, when you're petting a dog and you get that kind of like comforted feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you.
So I love textures and like soft textures. I'll even wear furry coats or have something soft that I can just
Yes.
nearly like pet or just kind of rub and kind of feel like the pom pom. You could take the pom pom off and use that as well. I've used that before.
Oh, brilliant. We've heard it a couple of times, which is great. And again, I would have, I kind of go through a little bit of trichotillomania. I don't know if people know about that, but it's a kind of I suppose it's a symptom of OCD where it's hair pulling. That's what it is.
Yes.
And if you ever notice me on camera, I hide it, but I do have I'll have different strands that I've actually twirled and pulled, and I try to tuck them in, and I patches and stuff. And it's again that it's a textural thing. Now the pulling is something else, but at the moment it's a textural thing. From a sound point of view, I'm really finding white noise is like uh, it's I don't know how to describe it. Uh, have you come across
I
these
haven't
sounds
listened
on YouTube?
to
And
white noise actually. It's something
so
I've heard of, but I haven't looked into.
yeah, this is something new and it's growing, I think, because so white noise is kind of what I'm listening to at the moment to help me fall asleep. I'm a bit of an insomniac as well, so it's cabin noise from a plane. It's that
Mm-hmm.
hum of a plane. Uh, Others are, I think, a washing machine is one, and maybe the dull sound of a Hoover. There's so many, but it's almost like I always think even when my kids are small, if the Hoover was on for a decent amount of time, they'd fall asleep. So
Yeah.
it's something about that, and I haven't really got my head around it, but it just works. And literally all it is 2 hours of plane noise in a cabin. There's nothing else. You just put it in, and if it's what you
Yeah.
like, it's another example of the diversity of self-care. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's one. Michael, I thought you were afraid of flying. I am afraid of flying. But I do have surprisingly good kind of experiences with flying. And I've always found cabin noise kind of one of those better experiences. So that's kind of one I gravitate towards. Look, I'm just really, it's 8:45, and we kind of said 45 minutes. I think this has probably been one of the best chats on Instagram Live I've probably done. I haven't done many now, but like, it's amazing. Your depth and knowledge about this stuff is unbelievable. Like, you should be so proud. Like,
I'm
you're like
really glad that I got it at this age. A lot of my therapists say that, like, it's incredible to have the intervention at, I'm 21. A lot of people are in my group were in their 50s, they're in later life and they're not getting this. They've gone through their whole life wondering how to cope, and I'm getting these skills and I'm being equipped with them early, even though it feels like I have been struggling for years, but it is incredible, DBT.
Yeah. And I have to say publicly, you're part of the Mental Health Society and now MTU, with an amazing bunch. There's another Aoife as well, who we know from MTU, who's absolutely amazing. Well done for that, because it's all proactive stuff. It's stuff that doesn't go unnoticed. I can reassure you of that. And your page, The Anxious Being, what a great name. It's brilliant. I would absolutely recommend anyone for more of that sort of information, because you do it in a fantastic way. It's one of those stories that you kind of stick with because it's really good value. Like, you learn so much. I just want to say thanks so much, Aoife. Like, I really appreciate your time and for sharing your story in such depth.
No worries. And thank you for giving me the space to do it as well. I just think that regardless, I think that DBT should be taught in schools, that kids should be taught, and adolescents especially should be taught coping skills growing up, and no matter the severity of how you feel emotion or how you cope, that, even interpersonal effectiveness is communicating, how you communicate with people in certain scenarios. And I think not everybody needs therapy, but everyone can benefit from it. So
spot on. And I just reiterate again, at thesillyheads.com homepage, right down the bottom, lists of professional supports. Or alternatively, like, you guys, anyone can message us at the Silly Heads, or email us info@thesillyheads.com. As I said, we can't advise, but we can certainly listen and signpost to the best of our ability. Aoife, listen, thanks so much. We'll keep this now on our feed on the live, so people can go back and watch it, and we'll share it and stuff. It's been a breath of fresh air, like, really. I know you're probably. And
if people have any questions about DBT or want to message me directly, like, feel free to do so as well. I love chatting about mental health stuff, and something I'm passionate about. So
yeah, that's very clear. And I think you're inspiring a lot of people. So just continue to do so, but also mind yourself, and I know you're good with that. And it's great to see that people really kind of practicing self-care, because even myself, I say it a lot and I don't practice it enough. So I need to, seeing stuff like that motivates me to do it as well. So I'll thank you for that. But listen, I'm going to leave you go enjoy your night. Thanks again.
Awesome, you too.
Sure, look, we'll chat anyway back and forth as we do on Instagram and stuff.
Okay, thank you so much.
No bother.
Thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Bye everyone. Have a great evening.
Bye.